Sorry for talking silently. I think we got the sound working now. And this is Richard Sachs from Lost Arts Radio. Um, Starting a few minutes late today. I'm sorry. We'll try to be fast enough to get most of this in. I've got probably twice as much as I can cover, but it all seemed important. So we'll see how we can get through it as well as possible. Hope you're having a good weekend or whatever part of the week it is where, when you get around to listening on the archive, if that's how you're hearing us. And anyway, hope everything's going well for you. And before we get started this week, to quickly go through the items I want to cover. And for new people, this is a kind of a news review show for the events of the week, but obviously not comprehensive because it's really quick overview of the important things that have happened during the week up till now since our last broadcast and what their implications might be and importance for your life. We've said many times that for the main new comprehensive news show that we recommend. A lot of people hate me for recommending it because they think it's terrible, but I don't think it's terrible. There's a reason why it's banned all over the place, and I can't even say the name of it unless we want to get knocked off the air right away because the censorship's getting really intense. But it's done by a man whose initials are A and then J, and the first part of it is the short for information, and the second part is wars. And they've gone so far, they hate this show so much on the major global rulers that anything that has either one of those names in it for the title gets banned. And it's getting pretty severe. So just in case that happens to us in the near future, which it might because we get into some controversial issues, as you might imagine, and I could make a mistake and mention the name of that show in full or the name of the president that we have in the United States right now and say something good about him, which is forbidden. If that happens and we disappear and you don't find us here, I'm really hoping we don't lose you, and you can go to our website to find out where we are, lostartsradio.com. Still legal to say that. And also at brighteon.com. It's a substitute platform for these other ones that we're using live. And I'm trying to watch my language so that we don't get kicked off this right away, because it's easier to reach more of you who might forget to look at Brighteon if I can avoid getting kicked off for a while. But if we do, BRIGHTEON.com. Take a look at us there now, because it's a platform that's just starting, and it's an anti-censorship platform by a friend of us whose first name is Mike, and he's been banned from everywhere as well. So I can't say his name in full without danger to our being on the platform that you're seeing us on. But get used to going there, because they need more views, and it will help them get stabilized as a new service if you go there. Brighteon.com, and there's a lot of interesting stuff posted there. Anyway, getting to this week, I had some really frustrating experiences, my own fault, because of a thought I had. I was looking at the bigger picture of the world situation and the fact that most of the problems that we're experiencing as the human species here on this planet are problems that are intentionally engineered and created. I'm sure that you know about them if you're watching the show. You know about geoengineering, chemical agriculture, food processing, and killing the food so you won't get any nutrition out of it. That's not a mistake. It's not a technical oversight or the fact that they need more research or something like that. It's intentional. And we've talked about it before, the toxic medical system using drugs and injecting things into people, injecting poison into people, even little babies, and saying that's going to make them immune to disease. That's never been true since they started in about 1799 in England with a guy named Jenner. They've been maiming and killing people, mostly kids, all the way since that time, and it was not the adjuvants. It was just the main, I almost said the V word. I am not going to say that if I can help it, because that also will get, if you say the V word and you say anything bad about it, that also can get you disappeared right away. So anyway, that's been a scam since the beginning. It's really being pushed now, especially in California, but other states too, and other parts of the world. Fortunately, the new government in Italy, especially the president there, has been resisting it, which is fantastic. I hope he succeeds and spreads that understanding to a lot of other countries. The Wi-Fi and the 5G are designed to disrupt the intercellular communication between your your cells in your body, as including in your brain. And as Barry Trower has said as a guest on our Sunday show several times he's been on, you can look at the archives at lostartsradio.com or blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio. And he was explaining that these frequencies have been perfected since before World War II to control people's thoughts and actions, make people into assassins, things like that. And they have had some more development since that time, as you can imagine, since the 1940s. And I'm sure they're being used all over this country and a lot of the world to create chaos and crazy people rioting with tremendous anger against things that they don't understand. Most of them I've talked to don't even know what they're against. They just know they're really against it. And that's not just the poison food and the fluoride in the water. That I think that's frequency weapons as well, and they're going to intensify. And the new 5G system being rolled out is to increase the potential of that destruction. And so many other things like nuclear power, a disaster guaranteed to happen. They're trying to educate really stupid experts who will do things that are suicidal because they're so expert in their little tiny field, they don't even maybe understand the implications of it. But if you want to be educated and strategically aware and decide what things that are best for you to do with your time, you can't have a little narrow tunnel vision field of expertise, and that's why it's being promoted in higher education these days. But anyway, nuclear power, other forms of dirty energy technology, that's definitely intentional because we haven't needed petroleum-based fuel sources for at least 100 years. Look at the work of Stephen Greer if you want details. He's done a lot with it. There's hidden clean energy technology that's just being sat on. It's also reverse engineered from sources that you can look at Stephen Greer's recordings if you want to understand that. There's all this engineered poverty and austerity, and you're supposed to believe that that's to save the earth and that you should turn your air conditioner off and stop driving your RV and all these things to save the earth. No, if they wanted to save the earth, they'd just give you the clean energy. It's not your fault that you have to use gasoline or diesel. This is all part of an engineered extermination plan. Central banks orchestrated to keep you in poverty and financial stress and fake education and fake science and programmed entertainment to make you think that the heroes are the people that kill everybody the fastest. Even women are having those kind of prototype heroes now, and really poisoned food and water, fluoride in the water and lead in the water and all these other things. That's not to be depressed or negative or anything like that. Awareness of problems does not mean you're being negative. It means you're being awake, at least to that degree, aware of your situational awareness, like strategically. So I was looking at that all those things are man-made, engineered, designed to cause damage. It's not obviously to cause immediate extermination of life on the planet, because the technology exists now to do that within the next few minutes if they want to. That's not what's happening, obviously. It's being done step by step according to the numbers with certain notices that they're giving you as they do it to you, and certain milestones they have to cross and timelines and things like that. It's a ritual sacrifice, but we'll get into that later if we have time. The fact that we are far stronger in our natural state than our controllers means if we could heal ourselves, not just physically, but on all levels, and return to harmony with nature, then, the game would be over. And it doesn't mean that we would destroy all the bad guys. That's a misconception. And some of the people I really admire, like the newscaster we talk about all the time, I think has not yet realized that going out and fighting and killing the bad guys who are clearly doing all these things to humanity and life on Earth is not our most powerful approach. May be necessary in defensive situations, and I'm not a pacifist at all in those situations, but as far as the major change that we want for the future, it's not going to be done with with that kind of aggressive, preemptive fighting. It's not going to happen. There's something a lot stronger that we can do. So the fact that we've been divided into parties and labels and all these different identities that are supposed to hate each other and to prevent self-awareness, unity and healing and power to be used, I thought, okay, well, if people are unnecessarily fighting each other because they're Democrat and Republican and male and female and old and young and rich and poor and one religion and another and all this stuff, that's pretty dumb if we go along with that. Why would we want to waste our time and energy with that kind of a view of the world and life? So I thought, okay, why not just go talk to the leaders of some conservative and liberal groups, because I get to meet some of those people because of the work, for the radio and video show. And I just explained to them that all this division is a hoax, and they can just learn from each other and realize their common interests and goals and stop all the division. Just be unified around the idea of a better life for everybody, and work out the details in a cooperative manner instead of with hating and fearing each other. That was about as smart on my part as when I learned in the 70s that there had been cures for cancer known for a long time, and not just known but proven. And that's still true today. But you're definitely not supposed to know that or even think that might be true. But when I found it out in the 1970s, I was about 10 years into the health research I was doing. Then I thought, wow, people are going to be really excited and happy to hear about this. And they just, as soon as they know about it, they're going to start doing things differently. And if they've been diagnosed with cancer, they're going to follow a different protocol so they don't kill themselves with the chemical treatment, stuff like that. Yeah, they were excited. Okay. I mean, not exactly the way I expected. They were excited which one was going to get to attack me first for disturbing their unconsciousness that they were really upset about having interrupted. They would rather do chemotherapy and radiation and cut their bodies to pieces, even if it would cause more cancer and kill them, because it was familiar and endorsed by experts, in quotes, and the government. And accepted as really good science by their families and friends. This is not just about cancer. This is about all kinds of things. You can imagine why we may disappear from this platform any week. And please don't forget about brighteon.com, where you can find us anyway. Anything really different, than the conventionally approved treatment, especially if it was working on people, was called a conspiracy theory, a fraud, quackery, evil, terrifying, a threat to public health, stuff like that. So you have to be brave enough to realize what all the accepted authority figures are telling you might not be exactly accurate. In fact, it might be completely opposite from the truth, and very often it's a good source of guidance, because the opposite principle works a lot of the time. I just wanted to get people to drop their labels and find their common interest and work together to turn around where the world was going. I thought that was somewhat reasonable. But what I found out is, like with the natural cancer cures, the liberal and progressive leaders I talked to just cut me off. They wouldn't even talk. Once they knew where I was coming from, that I was questioning the party line like a religion, that if you're a progressive, these are all your opinions, okay? You can't have any other opinions except if they're on this list. And it's not that they say, I'll disagree with you. They hate you in a lot of cases, based on fear, which they don't realize, but it comes out as hate. And they wouldn't even talk. Many of these leaders wouldn't even talk about common ground. It kept happening. Fear and hate would stop the conversations. And with the conservative leaders that I talked to, they were a lot more polite, and open about it. But my feeling was that they would be nice and then just forget all about it as soon as we finished the discussion. A different kind of issue. So I'm back to the drawing board as far as ways to get people to drop their labels and party affiliations. And anybody that wants to offer any suggestions or things that you've learned, if you've tried to do the same thing, you're welcome to share it. Just put comments on this video if you want to. But I still have the understanding from looking at all these major issues in the world, and especially the ones that threaten the future survivability of Earth as an environment that we can actually physically live in. They're not partisan issues. That's what I want to try to explain, and I'll give some examples of that, because if you really understand it, you think, wow, that was just a complete fraud. We never had to have a party to identify with. We never had to decide if we were left or right or anything. Because, see, the problem is if you do, as soon as you decide you're on the left or on the right or a conservative or a liberal, there's a whole list of stuff you believe and another list of things that you think are wrong. What if you were really brave and didn't have to have any of that? So let's look at some examples of issues that relate to this week, and see if you can work on it for yourself. Because most people listening to the broadcast might think, even if you're not a progressive, you might be a libertarian or you might be a conservative or a whatever you are. I don't know. But see, I don't think that any of those are real true labels. I think you're pure consciousness listening to me wearing a costume called a human body that a lot of people think is who they are. And I'm trying to say, you guys, that's not who you are. You're wearing that costume for a few minutes. It's called a lifetime. There's something much deeper underneath, and it doesn't have labels of any kind. It doesn't have a religious label or a party label or a race label or anything like that. It's just you. And it has massive potential, but only if it wakes up and becomes self-aware. And so that's the number one thing that I found that the global rulers want never to happen. You might be able to find out about geoengineering or pesticides or GMOs or something, or those things they inject into you. But they can deal with that. What they can't deal with is if you really found out, not as a belief, okay, that you would just repeat, that they're not worried about that at all. You can have whatever belief you want. But if you really get in touch with what is inside you and start acting in connection with it, that puts them on a very vulnerable position. They can't have that. So that's guidance. That means it's something we should do. Anyway, back to examples from the week, and watch your reaction as I talk about these things and see if you get offended or if you can just relax and look at them as they are, which is what I'm suggesting. Not, well, is this compatible with the Republican position or the Democratic position or the Libertarian position? Or what if you forget all that and just say, is that true? It sounds really simple, but I think if people had that perspective, things would start getting better really quick, and it wouldn't be necessary to keep fighting as much. So I think probably the biggest thing that I've come across during the week as a really striking issue has been about abortion. It's been a point of contention for a long time. And generally people who like to think of themselves as conservatives or some religions like Christian or Catholic, they're against it. And usually it's connected to their religious tenets or their party line. And the people that are thinking of themselves as liberals or progressives think of it as a woman's right, and more specifically, for a woman's right to do what she wants with her own body. And it should be an option for women in any circumstance, because nobody should be able to tell her what to do. That's against freedom, right? Individual freedom, which is supposed to be one of the primary foundations of America. And what was really neat about the Declaration of Independence, they talked about that in the Constitution to some degree, is that they say these are not individual freedoms are not rights that you have because we just happen to get the right constitution. Everybody in the world, and everybody and everywhere else too, has the same rights of freedom, and they come from God or from nature or both, and you're born with it. And even if a government passes a law that you're not free anymore, the law is void because you're born with freedom as your right and your natural quality and the basis of living in the world. You can't have an organization, for example, like the United Nations, that people still don't realize what an incredibly evil organization that is, because it's got so many great people working in it. But at the top, where they decide all the programs and policies, it is. And they have a declaration that these rights are granted by the UN. Well, if they're granted and they came from the UN, well, of course, the UN can revoke them and leave you without any rights. That's called tyranny. And the US was a country, in fact, that organization shouldn't have any place physically in the US. It should be kicked out, and the US should never again be a member of it. But I know that sounds radical to most people because they don't understand what the UN is actually involved in. It's not a partisan issue at all. It's just, if you see somebody plotting mass murder, you don't think, let's see, am I a Democrat or Republican about whether that should be okay? No, it's mass murder. It's not okay, no matter, even if you're a member of a party nobody ever heard of, it doesn't make any difference. If they're going to do horrible things to destroy people, the U.S. should not be a member of it, but that, we haven't gotten to that point yet. Anyway, back to this issue at hand. The people who consider themselves liberal, Democrat, progressive, whatever, socialist, generally they think that it's a woman's own body that's involved. There's nobody else that is a stakeholder, so to speak, to use the global ruler's own terminology in this. But there is another stakeholder that they seem to have forgotten, and that's the new person, the baby, who is not a fingernail. It's not a part of the mother's body at all. And it's more like, and this is not a partisan issue in any sense of the word. If the mother is walking around holding a baby that's been born and drops it and says, well, that was my choice, what to do with my own body, you'd think she was crazy. But because of our programming, if it's still being carried internally, still a baby, still another person, but it hasn't learned to breathe air yet, it's not time. It's repairing itself and building, getting ready to breathe air, just like you repair yourself when you're sleeping. Doesn't mean you're not a person before you started breathing air. It didn't mean you weren't a person then either. And if you grab that baby who's getting ready to come out and you murder it, him or her, it's not part of your own body. And women should know this, men should know this, everybody should know it. It's what you call super obvious. It's not a question of belief. So I do agree, though, with the progressives and the liberals and everybody like that, socialists, that women absolutely have the right to make decisions of how to care for their own body. No question, 100%. So should men, by the way, of course. But the baby's not your own body. It's like this sacred trust of a totally different human being that you're going to get to meet if you don't murder it too soon, before that happens, I mean. And it's somebody else. But the liberals and progressives are right 100%. Health freedom to take care of your own body, what's really your own body, should be obvious. There shouldn't be any coerced treatments, things injected into you, things injected into your children, certain therapies for terminal diseases. That's your choice, not government, not the so-called healthcare system, which would be terrible if it was a single-payer system. It would be even more tyrannical. The government would absolutely define what healthcare you have to have. Of course, it'd be your choice. You just wouldn't get any food if you chose wrong. Anyway, health freedom is something I absolutely have been working for many decades. But as far as women, once you realize that the baby is somebody else, it's not you, whether you're the father or the mother, it puts a whole different light on whether it should be free and supported by taxpayer money for you to be able to murder your kid. I don't really think so. I think it should be super obvious. So I talked to liberal group leaders this week. I thought I'd just be reasonable, right? Really dumb. They didn't just disagree. They would start going crazy and want to do something really bad to me. I guess abort me after birth or something. And it wasn't a possible discussion. They refused to consider any unborn baby as a person, no matter what. That's the end of the discussion. Even though better technology is showing very recognizable baby, even a few inches long, moving and doing things inside the mother, totally secure and totally trusting that the mother would take care of him or her very early in pregnancy. Recognizable, even a few inches long. But why would it have to be what we think is recognizable to be a human? We have to go through stages when we're building our body, and some of them early on are less recognizable. So now one state, New York, has a new law. It's been signed into law by Governor Cuomo, that has been celebrating that you can kill your baby right up to when it's being born. It's great for women's rights, right? No, it's really satanic, basically. And I'm not saying that from a religious point of view at all. I'm actually not religious, and I'm trying to not have these religions of arbitrary beliefs, but be willing to question everything. That's real science. It's also real spiritual inquiry, if you're brave enough to do it, is question and be open to everything. So they can kill the baby right up to the time of birth. And the actual way that works is that if the baby gets born, you can actually kill it after that too. And that was explained in several different interesting sources that you can see on lostartsradio.com and other places. And a second state, which was Virginia, has a bill that was presented by a woman, by the way, that women should be able to kill their own babies even after they're born. And their governor, also in the same mindset, because he identifies as a Democrat, right? Which for some reason, the Democrats are all completely crazy on this issue, and they're absolutely will do violent things to you if you disagree. This woman, Delegate Chan, I think the governor referred to her when he was calling on her to talk to her, as saying, he said it was really nice, kind of a cordial Southern gentleman type accent, which I am not good at mimicking. But he said, yeah, no problem. I'll tell you exactly what would happen. It's been blown way out of proportion. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. The baby would be born, resuscitated, in other words, allowed to breathe, if the parents so desired, and it would be kept comfortable. And then a discussion would happen between the woman and the doctors, and even maybe more than one doctor. And, so they must be objective, right? And they absolutely know whether that's a person or a piece of tissue and still part of your own body, even after it's sitting over there breathing. And a discussion would happen, and then they would decide whether to kill the baby or to leave it alive. It's been blown way out of proportion. As I say, it's not a partisan issue in a sane society. How could it possibly have anything to do with left and right, or Democrat and Republican? Are we that far gone, way beyond recall of consciousness, that we can't see, oh, well, that's a baby. You're supposed to take care of those and not murder them. It's really better that way. Instead of that, people are thinking that is a party line philosophical thing. What? And 5 minutes before it was born and it hadn't started breathing air, do you think it's not a baby then? At what point do you think it's human or not human, or like a fingernail, part of the mother's body? It's advanced insanity. And I just still think it's curable. I don't think we have to have this vicious hatred between ideologies if we just regain our vision. So that's just my suggestion. Exactly the same thing with another continuing big issue this week about the so-called Green New Deal. And the Democrats, as a rule, all support it. They think it's great. Republicans, as far as I know, are mostly all against it. And why would it be divided along party lines? Aren't we supposed to be intelligent life on the planet? Wondering if there's more intelligent life in other places in the galaxy or other galaxies. That's kind of backwards, isn't it? Because we haven't shown that we're intelligent life at all up to now, and we still could, I think, but apparently not yet. Making it partisan, this Green New Deal thing is completely stupid, and the environment is obviously our life support system. You have to do everything you can to protect and enhance it. Democrats, I think, probably understand that more than Republicans, who do understand the scam aspect of how global warming and climate change are being used to take away your rights. But most of them don't have the sophisticated understanding to know that while that scam is going on, there's a real aspect of the environmental issues. There are many of them that actually threaten the survival of life on the planet. They're absolutely real and urgent. So I agree with the Democrats on that. And destroying your life support system is totally suicide. I would go farther than the Green New Deal goes in some respects, because toxic chemical farming was never needed. Justus von Liebig, who originated as a German chemist, realized it was a mistake after he came out with it, but it was too late for anybody to pay attention. It needs to be replaced with a system that's beyond organic, not the National Organic Program Organic, which the intent of the Department of Agriculture is to water that down until it's totally poison too. So I don't trust them for a minute, although there are good people working there, great people, but not the heads of the whole operation. So I think there needs to be a private, transparent, somehow, honorable entity to certify. And they don't have to use the word organic or biodynamic. They can choose whatever the word they want, but they have to be clear about what it means and what the standards are. And the USDA could lead the change in that direction if they wanted to, if they would stop supporting chemical agriculture and totally ban GMOs, which should have been done on day one, and phase out the chemical fertilizers because they were never needed. Justus von Liebig knew that, and they don't grow things as well as real farming. And somebody needs to remind the farmers how to do real farming again and make money, because there's nothing bad about making money. I'm a total supporter of free market capitalism. And the people, Michael Moore and others, who go around saying capitalism is the problem, we got to get rid of that, we got to get socialism. They either have no understanding of economics and freedom, or they do, and they're malicious. Because free market capitalism was what this country was supposed to have, not government collusion with, Bayer and Monsanto and nuclear power industries and telecom giants and social media giants and things like that. That's not free market capitalism. It's called fascism or corporatism, as Mussolini referred to it during World War II in Italy. So, I appreciate the necessity of real free market capitalism, but not supporting businesses like many of the Republican leaders do that are toxic, and that's flawed economics. Because if you support something like 5G, which will make huge amounts of money while it's killing people, and they're going to give everybody cancer and exacerbate existing health conditions and things like that, and there's massive data on that. We don't need more research to know those things. That's not legitimate business. That's not free market capitalism. That's the government supporting suicidal corporations. Shouldn't be allowed at all. And the Republicans that say, well, at private companies, we'll let the market figure it out. The market's not going to figure out in time if they're already spreading damage and poison worldwide. So I think those things should be banned or phased out quickly. But I don't agree with the socialists or Democrats or progressive when they say that all this massive change over to good technology should be done by raising taxes and massive increase in government, which they admit, Ocasio-Cortez and others, that it would be this huge amount of intrusion and control by government. That has no place in America or any free country at all. And it's a menace, I think, to the United States and anybody that follows it in Europe or anywhere else. And the people behind it that I've talked to won't even talk about it. They're not interested in what's wrong with it. They're just tunnel vision. It has the word green in it. It's backed by socialism. It must be great. It's progressive. I mean, this is zombie-like behavior. And it's a real danger to the whole biosphere, no matter how green it is. Because the way that it's written now, not just with government expansion and massive tax increases, things like that, which should never be allowed. It also is tied to things like universal basic income, which is a horrible idea. Now, saying that, I don't say it because I don't want people to have money. I think I'd love everybody to have plenty of money. I absolutely see nothing wrong with money. I disagree with Cortez and Moore that there shouldn't be billionaires allowed. No, you should be allowed to get as rich as you want, but not by hurting and killing people and the ecosystem. I don't think that should be allowed at all. Once there's a universal basic income, whoever gives that income calls all the shots. And the people doing it, either at the Federal Reserve or the government agencies that are partners with the Federal Reserve or work under it, they're totally corrupt. They're totally malicious. They're totally destructive. If they can give you money, it's just like them giving money to towns and counties and states. There are what you call strings attached. In Australia, for example, they're telling people that you can keep your welfare and your eating money and the ability to feed your children if you're on welfare. But if you don't get the injections that we require that are full of poison, you don't have any more income from your welfare. That should be a hint for anybody with any intelligence where a universal basic income goes and why it's a horrible idea. Same thing with trying to fix prosperity with a certain minimum wage, whether it's $15 or $100 an hour or $1,000. You cannot make everybody rich by making the minimum wage $1,000 an hour. Why would that be the case? Because even the Democrats are not proposing $1,000 an hour as far as I know. Why do you think that wouldn't be a good idea? Do you know? It's because when you just issue arbitrary money based on nothing, as the central bank and the so-called Federal Reserve do, what happens is that you devalue the money and you end up in a society where it's really hard for people to buy their own homes, where both the mother and the father in a home have to work all the time, leaving their kids at the mercy of the daycare centers or the federal government agencies or whoever wants to take care of them, in quotes. It makes a society of financial stress. And the idea is that if we're all stressed trying to make money or living according to conditions imposed by welfare, then we're not going to be dissenters or cause any problem to tyranny. It's really short-sighted. It's not intelligent. The people of the Green New Deal see nothing wrong with it. And I try to get through to some of the leaders there, and no chance. Real prosperity that come from free market capitalism and abolishing the Federal Reserve and abolishing unconstitutional federal agencies and regulations like, putting you in prison for collecting rainwater, stuff like that. That prosperity, that natural prosperity, creates a huge increase in charity, and things get a lot better even for the people that can't earn money or work. And also, it's really important that Green New Deal people need to know that you need to protect U.S. businesses with trade tariffs where appropriate, because if you don't, it's really, really simple. If there's a place where there's slave labor allowed and countries with no pollution restrictions or anything, all the business is going to go there, as it's been doing to China for the last quite a few years now, according to plan. And if you do that, you have no more sovereignty because you can't produce your own essential materials. And the early people, a lot of the early people in this country understood that, but apparently now they think it's something evil, especially the Democrats for some reason, and I don't know why. Single-payer healthcare is another part of the Green New Deal. Total disaster. And superficial thinking says, well, we have to just give everybody healthcare because it's a universal human right, right? That's the kind of thing that the United Nations says and the socialist people in general. And in a way, they're right. Real healthcare, I totally agree. Real healthcare is mostly education, learning, don't eat this because it will poison you. And over years, it will give you cancer or kidney disease or diabetes or whatever. So don't eat it, okay? Don't drink water with fluoride in it. Don't stay out of the sun because sunlight is critical for health. That's why the government says it'll kill you. So start learning how to follow this guidance. Real healthcare is 90% education. You have to have 3 kinds of exercise. If you don't, certain things are going to happen to your body that are predictable, and they're reversible, and they're preventable. So doctors, real doctors, I think it comes from the word docere, which means teacher. And that's what a real doctor is. Not somebody who says, well, we have no idea why your body's falling apart, but just take this toxic chemical. I mean medicine. And then it's going to be great. It's going to go away. And then you take the toxic chemical because this expert just told you, and then it starts making things worse. And you go back with new symptoms and problems. And the doctor, who should have been a teacher, but doesn't understand themselves, says, well, yeah, I looked that up. You have this disease. And it's a 7-syllable Latin word. And you say, oh, wow, I never knew I had that disease. That's incredible. What do I do, doctor? And the doctor says, well, we have this toxic medicine that you can swallow. That's going to really fix it. But if it doesn't, and don't bother about all this list of 100 things that'll happen to you. They're just side effects, and they're written so small you can't see them anyway, so it can't be a problem. And once they start destroying your organs and it gets really bad, don't worry, just come back and we can start removing your organs because they're a mistake of nature anyway. This is current healthcare. And if you have, the trauma part, the emergency part, when you get hit by a car and they sew you back together, that's really talented and extremely good. But as far as sickness and disease and health and stuff, to say they're out to lunch would be an insult to people who are out to lunch. Because these guys really have missed it completely, and they're doing so much damage. According to a recent paper that I wrote, I didn't write it, I read it, by a couple of doctors, and I might think of their names before we're done here. They're killing about 1 million people a year in America with the health industry and ruining the lives of most of the others with getting you addicted to multiple toxic chemicals that they call medicine, and people actually believe it. That's not even considering the kids that are being killed and injured with injecting various things into them that are called safe and effective. This is really insane, maliciously insane at the top. So if you want to abolish medical tyranny and monopoly, which has been going on since almost back to 1910, you'd never want single-payer healthcare, universal healthcare. That's a terrible idea. And the people who are behind the Green New Deal that I've talked to don't want to know. They just are holding to a certain ideology, and no matter what, when the country falls apart, they'll say, well, we don't have any idea why it fell apart, but it was probably because of capitalism, right? They have no clue. So the Green New Deal could be done. It could be really good. It could be fixed up. It could be corrected. And neither side will listen. The Republican leaders I talked to were saying that, all the environmental stuff is just a scam, and we're going to have all this wonderful business with the Internet of Things and all that stuff. They don't know what's wrong with 5G. They won't compromise on those things, and they just think they're good for the economy. And the people on the other side think that it's going to be great just by declaring that everybody's forced. It's a recipe for total disaster. So that's another thing going on that should not be a partisan issue ever. Anybody with any common sense would never see it as partisan. So I don't even know how to talk to the people on either side there with the right effect. And another issue that should not be partisan, there's a big theater on CNN and some other TV outlets after that, and commented on by newspapers about the arrest of this guy, Roger Stone, who was a former campaign manager for the current president. I almost said his name. I don't want to get banned for that. He was arrested in this huge show, and CNN was brought in by the FBI leaking the documents in advance, which is a felony, and they just did it anyway. And they brought him in to be in perfect camera position to film 29, I think, armed agents in SWAT gear and automatic weapons and night vision goggles and all kinds of things, and 17 vehicles, 2 of which were armored. This is an older guy who doesn't even own any weapons. He's living in a neighborhood. He's not violent. He's been in touch with the Mueller's Inquisition on his own. He already told him that any other information you want, just let me know and I'll give it to you. But in order to demonize the president further and establish this image that he's served by these horrible monsters like Roger Stone, they had CNN there in advance to film the raid. It was just totally ridiculous. It's illegal too. They can't just raid you and then check everything you have in case you did anything wrong. And they were there putting tape over video cameras and stealing the DVRs and the internal mechanisms of them. So none of the evidence of the ridiculous raid they did could be found. And they made a mistake, which I thought was really interesting, kind of divine intervention. They forgot to take out one of the real DVRs. So what they did in collusion with CNN, setting them up for perfect angles and everything, totally illegal, is all on tape. And now it's just a question of whether the Congress will be able to do anything about it. It was all part of an ongoing coup on the president, who, by the way, just gave a State of the Union address. And I watched every word of it, listened to the whole thing. I thought it was excellent, but I would have taken it further than the things that he said. I think that he should have already built the barrier at the border by declaring an emergency and using military funds like they do to build facilities much bigger than that all over the Middle East, where it's not even legal for the U.S. to be. But it was a good speech, and it was interesting, again, this party line nonsense, which is going to kill the country if it persists, and I hope it doesn't. But the Republicans were all cheering, even though a lot of them are very hypocritical, and they never supported stuff that the president was trying to do. They could have gotten this wall passed very easily when they had a majority in both houses, and they didn't do it, and they didn't support a lot of other important things he was trying to do, but they were real enthusiastic, clapping all over the place. The Democrats, on the other hand, most of them were sitting there real nasty and angry, and when the president said things like he was going to propose a bill to keep babies from being murdered when they're already born or almost going to be born, Democrats were saying, wow, this guy is horrible, and just staring at him with hatred. And he gave this long explanation with guests who had participated in the drama that's going on the border, some of which had family members killed by invading criminals coming across illegally. And people like Kamala Harris, who will probably run for president, and others like that, were just shaking their head and just horrible expressions on their faces. What were they thinking? Are these people insane, or they know that they're, talking about nonsense and doing it anyway on purpose to fool people? I don't know. But in either case, it's discouraging to see it. He talked about stopping child trafficking, the great jobs figures, illegal alien victims, like I said, and the Republicans clapped, and the Democrats were really mad about the whole thing, thinking, wow, this guy is a total monster. He's talking about securing the border and not letting kids be killed. He must be really terrible. And apparently people believe that stuff, and they actually go along with it, and they don't realize these people on the Democrat side, and it could be Republicans. I'm not partisan on either side, but at the moment, these were Democrats, and they refused to clap when really good things were being announced. Very strange. You ought to watch it if you haven't yet. Also on the censorship, maybe we have time for one more thing. It's an example too. It's getting much worse. Good people on social media, on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and what's that other one? Twitch. This woman in Greece, I believe, she speaks English and Greek, just got banned. She is a big Twitch user. She plays video games, right, on the internet, and a lot of people follow that and they think it's great. She got banned because she made an unacceptable statement about biology, which biology, by the way, I should clarify, is not partisan. The same biology applies to people of any party, any gender, whatever. And she said something about the two existing genders, implying that there aren't a whole bunch of other ones. And she got completely banned, demonetized. Her whole income source from Twitch was eliminated overnight. And they said she was hateful toward the community of people that were not either gender, and that someday she would look back on that and understand that she got a really important lesson. This kind of really bad stuff is increasing, and apparently the Democrats, liberals, progressives support it. They cite anything that they don't agree with or think is okay as hate speech, right? Even if it has nothing to do with hate at all, they call it hate speech. This is why hate speech laws are deadly for any country. They should be abolished, because it's better to have to listen to something you don't like, even if somebody's really hateful, as long as they're not calling for murder or crime or something to be committed. If they hate somebody, you can't stop that by making it illegal. All you can do is bring in tyranny. It's a really bad idea. So on the censorship, they've had all kinds of hearings in Congress in the recent past. The Republicans either ask really stupid questions, or they don't comment at all, or they just kind of waste the time. The Democrats don't even try to do anything about it. They just ask things that are designed to make it sound like it's not happening, even though probably a lot of them do understand it's happening. And the Republicans say, well, these are private companies, and we can't do anything about it. They should just do whatever they want. But you see, they're not private companies because they have special government support in different ways and special permissions. And they're misusing those because they're being used as a giant election tampering machine, making sure that in this case, no Republicans or conservatives get elected, and that the current president gets kicked out along, hopefully on their side with the vice president too, so they can put in their own people as soon as possible. A final note on abortion, because we only have a couple minutes left, is there's a great group that you might want to look at. It's called activistmommy.com. It's a lady named Elizabeth Johnston, really brave and inspiring. She's been working to try to get kids protected for a long time, and she's planning what she calls a day of mourning on the 23rd of this month of February in New York. And she's saying, whether you come to it or not, she's saying, recognize it all over the country by wearing black. Don't shop for anything. Close your business. Repent or apologize for the whole abortion thing, and pray for that to turn around. It's not partisan. You don't have to be any particular religion or anything like that. And I think that's a cause worth donating to. She's doing great work, getting demonized and threats from all over the place. The people who are on the other side from her are generally violent and demonstration of hateful attitude, and she's doing the opposite thing. So same, I've got like 3 minutes. The same on the Second Amendment issues. Gun buyers in Illinois will soon have to give up all their social media records and expose that activity to be able to buy a weapon for self-defense. Terrible idea. Free speech, which is talked about in the First Amendment to the Constitution of the U.S. and is really a right that people have all over the world, no matter where they live. And the Second Amendment, the right to defend yourself either against tyrannical government trying to do bad things to you, as has happened all through the 20th century and before. Those should be non-negotiable. And in fact, they are non-negotiable the way they're written in the Constitution. But people on the Democrat Party are making believe, or maybe they actually believe this, that if you outlaw weapons, everything will be peaceful. It's going to be great. It's really, really stupid, because the places where the weapons are illegal already, completely illegal, like schools or a lot of private businesses keep them out and things like that. The schools have proven to be one of the most dangerous places, not because they allow weapons, but because they don't. And the same in cities where they make it almost impossible to get a firearm to defend yourself. They have the most gun crime, or to use that term, gun violence, of any place in the country, such as Chicago, or whole countries where they don't allow firearms to be easily acquired, like Mexico, are just awash in gun violence themselves. But people of a certain political persuasion seem to be unable to understand that. And hopefully they won't win, because the first requirement of a government before it starts going to the next level of atrocities against its citizens is always to disarm them. And hopefully there will be some kind of a return of intelligence in the U.S. to understand that, not allow it to happen. So these are just some examples of where partisan and label thinking is very bad for our future. And my suggestion to everybody is drop your labels, work on your own perception, try to make it deeper and better, not partisan, think outside the box. Support us if you can, if you've got funds to do that, so that we can keep going, because it's in question right now. LostArtsRadio.com. If you're brave enough to start working on yourself, because I suggested deepening your own conscious awareness way beyond partisan thinking, check out planetaryhealingclub.com. There's Gateway there, and access credentials to a group that goes much more deeply into this. It's all about working on yourself and revolutionizing your own quality of life, so you'll have more to contribute to the outside world in the future. Final note, and then we got to go, is people have talked to me about this. I think it's a great idea. Any chemtrail pilots that get brave enough or figure out a way that they're not going to be destroyed by their employers, that want to share what's actually going on in geoengineering, feel free to contact us, me personally, Richard at LostArtsRadio.com. We'll verify your credentials, and then in a way that is anonymous, help people understand what it is that you're in the middle of. And I would greatly appreciate it. Remember the free public show tomorrow night. It's going to be a special show on new breakthrough in 9/11 information. I think you might enjoy it. Everything else will be at LostArtsRadio.com. And thanks for being with us again. I really appreciate it. Hope your week is great, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Talk to you then.